Hey there, gang. Patrick King here, and I'm coming at you live with another question of the day. Today's question is actually a really common one for a lot of horses and riders. This question comes in from Elizabeth, and she says, I have difficulties riding vaults, or small circles, on the right rein. My horse tends to lean on its inside shoulder and fall to the inside, making the vaults smaller and smaller, and making me sit to the inside too, which makes things worse. What's the best way to correct this? And she goes on to say, I get contradictory advice to tackle this issue. One is to raise the inside right hand upwards toward the withers to lift the right inner shoulder and shift the weight to the outside hind leg. And the other is don't raise that inside right hand, but move it slightly outwards and sideways toward the horse's inner ear while maintaining a steady, tight contact on the outside rein, the left rein in this case. Difficult to describe. I hope you get what I mean. She says, I know it's a straightness issue. My horse is right-handed. We do groundwork and in-hand work to help our riding from the ground. So the question is, what can we do with Elizabeth's horse and anybody's horse if you're out there and you're listening and you have this challenge? Whether it's the left or the right side, it's going to be this essentially the same issue. Okay, so again, to reiterate, Elizabeth is saying, I have difficulties riding vaults, small circles, on the right rein. The horse has a tendency to lean on the right shoulder and fall to the inside, making those circles smaller and smaller. Okay, how do we fix that? What we want to really think about with this, Elizabeth, and everybody that's working with a challenge like this, again, whether it's to the left or to the right, what we want to think about is the horse's natural balancing diagonal, or what we'd call the appropriate balancing diagonal. Okay, when we learn to post, if we're riding English, rising the trot, we learn that we rise and fall with the shoulder on the wall. Why? Why do we do that? Because in most instances, that's going to be the horse's natural balancing diagonal. So what Elizabeth is describing here is that when she's tracking to the right, her horse falls to the inside shoulder, okay? Which means rather than the rise and fall with the shoulder on the wall, the horse is on the opposite diagonal. So in this case, I would say the horse is on the wrong diagonal, okay? In other words, the balance is compromised. They're struggling with the balance, okay? Now, one of the, I think, the simplest ways to help a horse with this is through a leg yield. We can also play with shoulder in. We can play with varying the size of circles. We can play with lots of different exercises and things to do. But what I like to think about, the basic role of the leg yield is to help confirm that the horse understands our aids, but also to help re-establish the proper balancing diagonal. Think about a leg yield step or the preparation for a leg yield as a bit of a diagonalized half halt that helps the horse to find their proper or appropriate balancing diagonal. Okay, that's something that we really want to think about with this. Now, let's say we're riding at the canter and our horse is falling to the inside shoulder there. Okay, a lot of riders are told push the horse, move them over, push them back out. Well, you're on top of a falling object at that point. The horse is out of balance and scrambling to try to find their balance. So no matter how hard you push, you're not going to make things any better. What we actually need to do is help talk to the horse's stabilizing muscles, those balancing muscles that help the horse to stay in balance. Okay, we got to think about it. The muscles that they use to balance and the muscles they use to move are going to be different. Okay, so those balancing muscles are the important ones. And you know what you can't do? You can't fight with them. You can't push them around, okay? What we want to think about is if our horse is cantering, and this advice is going to be for anybody, but I'm going to specifically talk to Elizabeth with her horse cantering to the right. If we're cantering to the right and our horse is falling to that inside shoulder, that tells us they're balancing on the outside hind inside front rather than inside hind outside front. So again, that proper balancing diagonal. If they're leaning to the inside, we want to play, can we leg yield to help make that circle larger, okay? And the leg yield should really be able to be requested from our horse from a shift in our seat, not from a pushing with our leg, not from a pulling with the rein, but from the shift in our seat. Now, if we can't get the leg yield from that, what I would really recommend is downshift. Make a downward transition, find the balance at the trot. Are we still struggling at the trot? downshift again, find the balance at the walk and find that leg yield, and then carry on from there. It may mean that we make 800 transitions in our next ride, transitioning up and transitioning back down to help find that appropriate balancing diagonal. But what we want to think about, what I tend to think about, is a horse doesn't just drop their inside shoulder, okay? The shoulder gets dropped when they lose their balance. That's really what I like to think about. And so what do we need to do? Help them find their balance again, okay? And again, one of my favorite ways to do that is through a leg yield, okay? So one of the things to help you guys out, if you're struggling with your leg yields, I do have a free webinar out there. You can find it at lateralworkmistakes.com. That's going to give you some insight about not pushing, not pulling, and helping your horse to find that proper balancing diagonal. Even if we're talking about not riding lateral work, that webinar is going to help you to understand much better about your horse's balance, okay? So my question then for all of you, which canter lead feels more natural and balanced for you personally? Not your horse, but for you. I hope that this answer, Elizabeth, has been helpful, and I hope this has been helpful for any of you who may be struggling with that challenge of the horse leaning onto the inside shoulder, spiraling smaller, losing their balance on their circles or in any of their work. If you found this helpful, please feel free, share this video. If you've got a friend that needs to hear this advice to help their horse, please share this video with them as well. And what horsemanship questions do you have? Share them in the comments below, and I might just answer them in an upcoming video. Thanks, gang.